Transmission 100218.
Welcome to Porcelain Peak, a strange and scary podcast covering all things horror and science fiction. Here are your hosts, Anthony, John, and Anthony.
Thank you, as always, for the lovely introduction, Constance. We are Porcelain Peak. This is Season 2, Episode 30. I am John, and as always, I'm joined by Anthony and other Anthony. How are my boys doing today?
I'm doing pretty well. I'm excited for the news about the show that we're going to announce later today, and for everyone to check that out, what we got planned for the summer.
So excited.
How are you doing, Silva?
I'm doing great. I have been super excited to show off my Porcelain Peak face mask. Like I was saying earlier, went to Target and went to the horror movie section and browsed around there a little bit. That was nice to kind of get out and get back to my roots, you know.
How you doing, John?
I'm doing all right, yeah. I'm anticipating at any point in time that they're going to say, hey, you're going back to work, even though nothing has changed. And I'm a little leery of that, but I am ready to kind of get some semblance of normalcy back.
Yeah, I think we're all kind of feeling the weight of this quarantine now.
I'm not anticipating the world going back to the way it was a couple months ago. So I'm very interested to see what the new normal is going to be because, and we'll talk a little bit more about that when we talk about movie theaters and what the new normal might be for that. We'll find out. In the meantime, we are doing our best to not go absolutely crazy. All I can do is try to scrape the bottom of the barrel for new horror movies and sci-fi movies to watch. And
yeah, Ashley the intern has been scouring the internet and has been doing a very good job of finding us things to talk about, which I am very appreciative of because...
Yes, thank you, Ashley the intern.
Yeah, because we are, while we don't seem it, we tend to be pretty busy. We are going to be diving into 3 of our new sci-fi misses. So we are going to be getting those on the books, getting some redemption in. But first, let's hop into some news.
This is it, Jennifer. Your big break in TV. Fuck the prime time, bitch.
So one piece of news that I wanted to mention to you guys that I thought was pretty cool, actually, is Tom Cruise, being the crazy person that he is partnering up with Elon Musk and NASA to shoot a movie in outer space at the International Space Station, which is fucking crazy.
It's the most Tom Cruise thing I've ever heard in my entire life.
it's the most Elon Musk thing, too.
Yeah, so it's apparently not supposed to be related to Mission Impossible, which would have been dope and makes sense because he keeps getting more and more extreme with his stunts for those movies. So the plot right now is unknown, but NASA has confirmed it, and I'm curious, how are they going to get a civilian to the space station? Hopefully he has more luck than Lance Bass did. But I think that it brings up a cool topic of if this works and is successful, are they going to start making commercial flights to outer space? Is that going to be a new thing that people are going to be able to do? And if so,
they've talked about it for a long time.
Where can I sign up?
Well, so this is something that I think Elon Musk is specifically working on with SpaceX, right? Like that's the idea is to outside of NASA and these more maybe like government funded or controlled establishments who basically are your route to space, right? If they can get their rockets to stop blowing up on the way, which I'm like, okay, Tom Cruise, make sure that this rocket's not going to fucking explode before you get into it because I want to see, like, you've been on a good run with these Mission Impossible movies. Like, I want to see a few more. But yeah, they want to do commercial flight eventually. I mean, that's Elon Musk's thing. Elon Musk is all about, like, let's go to Mars, that kind of thing.
Yeah, colonize it.
Yeah, so I think that this is probably a big publicity stunt for him, and obviously it helps out Tom Cruise because he's known for doing his crazy stuff, and that gets butts in seats to whatever he's doing. So imagine how successful that would be, like how much of a craze that would be, and that would start the exact topic of, okay, well then let's all go to space. And
right.
That's exactly what they want. So I'm sure that it's just going to be like a big advertisement. I wouldn't be surprised if like Red Bull hops on and like helps sponsor it or something.
That's all I had. John, I think you had some stuff you wanted to talk about too, right?
Yeah, so we got a release date for Into the Spider-Verse 2.
Thwip. Yeah.
Yeah, so I believe it's going to be coming out. I think it was in October.
Yeah, I think it's like October 22nd or October of 2022.
Yeah.
Sony doesn't always have success with their Spider-Man sequels.
Usually
Spider-Man 3 and Amazing 2. So hopefully...
It's October 7th, 2022 is the current.
And it was originally supposed to be like
trend.
April 2022, I think. Yeah, I mean, I actually this is weird that, because I had known about this news, but it's weird that you decided that was the news that you were going to do for this episode, because I just watched the movie last night. I'm excited. I thought the first one was great. Far From Home, in terms of Spider-Man sequels, I thought was fun. True. Nothing crazy, but it was fun. But Spider-Verse, that team is very talented. I have complete trust in the people involved, so as long as the majority of that team comes back for the next project, let's see it. Let's do it.
Agreed.
Yeah, agreed.
It was probably my favorite movie of that year.
Yeah.
Just so well animated, so well voice acted. The plot lines in the story were just pieced together in a way that you could only really get from animation. I'm curious to see. There have been a lot of rumors that it might end up being live action, which I'm not down for.
I'm only down for it if it means bringing all of the different Spider-Men from the different, like if they could somehow, which the more time goes on, and I've talked about this before, like with horror legacy sequels and stuff, like people are coming back to these projects, and like I would not be completely baffled anymore if, especially like a Tobey Maguire decides that he wants to be involved in some capacity again. Andrew Garfield would be a bit more surprised, but if you get all those guys together and you could do, or even get like some of the people from, like at the Nick Hammond, who did the live action one, the TV show back in the day, like if you got them all into a Spider-Verse movie, I'd watch it. I think it really should be animated.
Yeah.
But say you get all those guys together, have them voice act the characters they played in those respective movies. That's what they did in the comic, is they had like the Raimi version of Spider-Man show up. They had like the Garfield version.
Oh,
like,
really?
Yeah, and like the Japanese Spider-Man. Yeah, so it's been done in the comics. I think it would make for a pretty insane like left turn move for...
Well, and I think with all of the different things that we've had as far as like the Netflix series is Siri, what I don't know where I would go from there.
Hey Siri?
Yeah, but yeah, the Netflix shows. And then also with some of the other still technically Marvel but outside of Spider-Man stuff that have used typical Spider-Man villains like Kingpin. It'd be really interesting to see, like, there are multiple people who have done those roles. It would be interesting to see maybe different versions of villains too.
Yeah. Well, now we're hearing, I mean, I'll just mention this briefly. This isn't my main news bit, but it did show up on our radar that Keanu Reeves may be involved with that new Justice League Dark project.
As Constantine.
Hey,
Yeah.
all right.
So that's a possibility. My main news story, though, is just continuing the conversation that we've been having over the past few weeks, which is the state of the box office and movie theaters right now. So the box office numbers are, again, like I said before, still basically just the drive-ins and the theaters that happen to still be open for whatever reason. So that movie that I checked out, The Wretched, is still number one at the box office. Nothing else that I had ever heard of or really could care about was on that list, but there is a box office. Since a lot of states are starting to loosen up restrictions on what can be open, Texas has basically put out the announcement that theaters are allowed to open if they want to. And a lot of states are starting to do this, and the majority of large theater chains are refusing to do so until July.
Why would you?
Yeah, and so they have the option, but they're not. But I think it's interesting to look at like what the regulations are there for this potential opening, and maybe apply that to what we could see here in California or in other states when movie theaters do start to open. It looks like there will be a much decreased capacity, which is like what you were saying with your job opening, 25%. So basically the rule now is you can watch the movie with family or whoever you went to see the movie with, but you do have to be separated group by group with 2 seats between you, which I assume probably equates to around 6 feet in those those newer, fancier seats. And then every other row has to be completely empty, which to me, outside of, I wouldn't go because I'd still be afraid of getting sick. That actually sounds like a pretty legit setup to go to the movies, is just like downsize the crowd by 25%.
To me, they would need to go in after and sanitize everything.
I'm sure that's a requirement.
Well, what I was going to say is, and what I imagine is probably going to end up happening, is that you're going to see showtimes greatly decrease to like maybe 2 or 3 a day.
Yeah.
To give a couple hours between screenings for disinfecting everything. Another interesting aspect of that is going to be when these movie theaters do start to open again, they're basically all going to be in dire straits financially. What that is going to mean in terms of how they decide to get along, like how they decide to continue going. Could be a pretty big change for the movie industry in that there have been rumors floating around that Amazon was potentially considering buying AMC so that they could use AMC to distribute Amazon original movies. This is not at all confirmed. It was just a rumor floating around, but it is an idea that people are playing with. The biggest part of that news I think is very interesting is that there is some talk toward the idea of overturning the Paramount laws or whatever, which are laws that keep studios from unilaterally owning theater companies because obviously you could push out other competition and stuff like that. Well, now they're looking at potentially overturning those laws so that there are more outlets for theaters to.
I think if they do that they need to make it so you can't do shit like that. I mean, I'm sure people will find loopholes. So that they
make
can
it more
push
heavily
out.
regulated.
Yeah.
So the last piece, because we had mentioned Scoob, is that Scoob does come out end of this week. I'm excited to check it out. They're not getting as much backlash right now because they did not do what Trolls did, which is have a theatrical release, in quotes, alongside a VOD release. They're just doing, obviously, they're straight to VOD. And so I think what's interesting is to look at what Scoob needs to do to succeed. I'm not
Cut him off. Play the Oscars music.
So I'm not going to take full credit for that joke or all this information. There's a really, really good guy on YouTube called Dan Merle who does a whole box office thing with all this information. But basically what Scooby-Doo would need to do, assuming that an animated movie by that studio, it's going to have a similar budget, which would be around $70 million. Scooby-Doo would have to make about, factoring in marketing costs, which typically you would double the budget for that.
Right.
But you have to assume that marketing costs are probably cheaper on this movie because they got cut off by the virus. They're not doing as much of the public stuff, but they would, at the end of the day, need to make around $175 million to break even. So we'll see probably by next episode if they have a really good success. Then I think that'll be a really good indication of what we're going to be looking forward to in the future for a lot of these movies.
So that's going to be it for news this week. If you want more news, go ahead and check us out on Facebook, where we are posting all kinds of new news, especially since Ashley the intern has been flooding us with all kinds of good stuff, including information about Scream and more.
Yeah, tons of cool stories. Go check it out.
All right, so before we get into our main discussion, we'll go ahead and jump into that trivia.
Here's how we play. I ask a question. If you get it right, Steve lives.
Please don't do that.
Come on, it'll be fun.
Please.
It's an easy category.
Please.
Movie trivia. Or even give you a warm-up question.
Don't do this, I can't.
Name the killer in Halloween.
All right, so me, Tone, is going to read to John. John's going to read to Anthony, and then Anthony will read back to me. And we're going to get started with the monster category. John, in the opening scene of 28 Weeks Later from 2007, who does Don desert to save himself? His wife, his son, his daughter, or his dog?
I'm glad that it's not asking for a name because it's his wife.
That is correct. On the board.
Yeah, starting off good. I predict we'll have more of the same from Silva here. The screenplay for Creepshow from 1982 was written by what novelist?
Stephen King.
It is indeed Stephen King.
Just watched a documentary on it.
Nice.
Yeah, it's called Just Desserts. All right. Tone, what director made both Invasion of the Body Snatchers in 1956 and Dirty Harry in 1971?
Clint Eastwood.
You are very incorrect. It is Don Siegel.
Oh, Don Siegel.
Oh, yes.
All right, so at the end of round one, John and Anthony have 1 and I have 0. And we're going to go ahead and jump into the gore disturbing category. John, in The Devil's Rejects from 2005, what is the name of the motel to which Otis and Baby first escape?
I'm going to say the Firefly Hotel. I know it's not correct, but...
It is Kaiki Palms.
Yeah, that wasn't gonna fucking happen. But in similar fashion, who directed House of a Thousand Corpses from 2003, Mr. Silva?
Be Robert Zombie.
Sorry, it's Rob Zombie. No, yes, you're correct.
Oh, Bobby Z.
All right, Tone. The Void from 2016, a personal favorite, was largely influenced by what H.P. Lovecraft novella?
The Void.
Nailed it.
The Sisterhood of the Traveling Ethereal Demon Beings. No, it's At the Mountains of Madness.
That makes sense. Yeah, totally. All right, so at the end of round 2, John has 1, Anthony has 2, and I am still not on the board as we move into psychological. John, in Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde from 1931, which character is not a victim of Hyde? Is it Ivy Pearson, Sir Danvers Carew, or Dr. Lanyon?
I like how you're like, oh, I'm glad my question didn't ask me for specific names, and then your next one is just all specific names.
But at least it gives the specific names. It's not asking me to recall them right off the top of my head. And I'm going to say that it's B.
Sir Danvers Carew?
Yeah.
Ooh, it was Dr. Lanyon.
I was making an assumption that the doctor would have been like the first one to go. All right, that's a bummer. What segment in Dead of Night from 1945 involved golf?
I have not seen Dead of Night. I'm going to take a wild swing.
Out.
And say that it is tea time.
I like Tea Time for sure. It is the golfer's story segment, which is the lamest fucking name ever.
Wow.
Guess he's going to need to take a mulligan on that one.
Oh, yeah.
All right, Tone. What David Lynch film was originally filmed as a television pilot?
Mulholland Drive.
Correct.
Yes.
Yeah.
I thought Twin Peaks might mess you up because that was
All right, so at the end of round 3, that is 1 for John, 2 for Anthony, and I am finally on the board with 1 myself, and we're going to jump into Paranormal. John, what color is the recurring raincoat in Don't Look Now from 73?
I'm going to say it's yellow.
It is red.
Yeah, red was my second guess. All right, so who directed The Exorcism of Emily Rose from 2005?
Dan Danielson.
I was about to say, you were off right when you got to the very first letter. It is Scott Derrickson.
Oh, okay, cool. All right, Tone. All the footage in The Blair Witch Project from 1999 is meant to come from how many cameras used by the backpackers?
I want to say 2.
It is 2.
All right, yeah.
One has sound and video, and the other one just has video, I believe, because then they do that really cool thing at the end where they're running around the house and you can hear her on the other side. Mm-hmm. You are making a comeback, but I won't call it that.
You've been here for years.
All right, so at the end of that round, John still sitting at 1, Anthony at 2, and now I am at 2 as well. Here we go with Killer. John, when the dance is canceled in the present day in My Bloody Valentine from 81, where do the teenagers decide to hold their own party?
Is it by the mine? Or like the entrance of the mine?
It's the mine, yeah.
Cool.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
Who is first accused of the murders in Alice Sweet Alice from 76? Alice, Father Tom, Mr. Alfonso, or Mrs. Tredani?
What was the second to last one?
Second to last one was Mr. Alfonso.
I'm going to guess that one.
You're incorrect. It is Alice.
Sweet Alice.
Yeah. No, I haven't seen the movie. I thought that was too obvious.
Sweet Alice.
Tone, what are the 7 deadly sins used to commit the murders in Seven from 1995?
Fuck,
You have
okay.
to list them all.
Gluttony, greed,
You're getting them in the order that they're listed too, so that's good.
okay.
Alphabetical.
Pride? Is vanity one?
It is not.
Okay.
Do you want me to list them off?
Go ahead, yeah.
If you feel like showing off, John, go for it.
All right, so it's gluttony, greed. You said pride was one of them?
Yeah.
Sloth.
Sloth.
And then
Vengeance, huh?
and it's envy. Lust.
Damn it.
And
Easy ones to miss.
What's the last one? What's the one he catches Brad Pitt in?
Wrath.
Wrath. Yep. There you go. It is gluttony, greed, sloth, envy, wrath, pride, and lust. There we go.
Bummer. That was tough.
Yeah, I probably wouldn't have been able to get that either.
I would have gotten to Wrath eventually, but I wasn't using 7 as my template. I was using Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood.
All right, so as we move into our last category, we are at a 3-way tie of 2 each, and we're going to jump into international. John in The Bird with the Crystal Plumage
Oh my God.
from 1970. Protagonist Sam Dalmas is struggling writer from what country?
Oh, I'm going to say Germany.
It was the old United States.
Oh, bummer. Bummer.
U.S.
All right. What actress appeared in the dual role of Katya Vada and Princess Asavada in Black Sunday from 1960?
Tilda Swinton.
It is Barbara Steele. I don't
Okay.
think Tilda Swinton was alive at that point.
I don't think so either.
I think
but
Tilda Swinton's eternal.
I mean, yeah, I am convinced that she actually is a vampire.
Tilda Swinton is permanent.
Yeah. All right, Tone. In Goodnight Mommy from 2014, which of the twin brothers is revealed? This is actually kind of a shitty question because it's a huge spoiler for the movie for anybody who hasn't seen it. But in Goodnight Mommy from 2014, which of the twin brothers is revealed to be dead? Elias or Lucas?
A 50-50 at the last flag.
Elias.
It is Lucas.
Oh, no. We're going to a three-way tiebreaker again. Oh,
Knife fight.
All right, so we're going to do a tiebreaker. Luckily, Ashley, the intern, is available so that we could all do it together.
Who in Final Destination 2000 to 2011 appears in more than one film? Claire Rivers?
Claire Rivers.
Yep, you got it. Her name is actually Clear Rivers. But
Ali Larder.
That does mean that the crown has moved on from Silva to Anthony Perez.
Thanks, Ash.
yeah, thank you.
All right, so that is going to wrap it up for trivia this week. Thank you again to Ashley the intern for coming in and saving us with the tiebreaker, and I'm glad that someone else has gotten the W this week. So from here, we're going to go ahead and move on to our main discussion.
I know this steak doesn't exist. I know that when I put it in my mouth, the Matrix is telling my brain that it is juicy and delicious. After 9 years, you know what I realize? Ignorance is bliss.
All right, so I'll go ahead and get us started. We're going to jump into our redemption for these sci-fi misses. These are some must-see movies that we should have seen as horror and sci-fi fans. And I decided to watch Mars Attacks. This was a double miss for me because I'm a pretty big Tim Burton fan, or I was of his earlier work, which would include this.
I mean, little backstory on that subject. That is basically how you and I became friends.
Was Mars Attacks?
Was Tim
Tim
Burton.
Burton.
Because we had an art class together, and I remember
Yeah.
talking to you, and you were like, I like Tim Burton a lot. And I was like, I like Tim Burton a lot. And then we just started talking, and now,
The fold-in of me is the one that's super fucking weird.
yeah, very strange. We'll get into that some other time. But I'm very excited that you watched this movie because I haven't seen it either. And based on what you have to say about it, that might push it further into obscurity for me or make it something I put on my list for tonight.
I really didn't know what I was getting myself into. I've seen bits and pieces of clips, I guess, and it's pretty goofy. And
It is incredibly goofy.
yeah, so that was a little bit harder, I think, for me. Parts of it reminded me of Beetlejuice, and parts of it reminded me of Scissorhands. You could see like the suburbia and that kind of thing. But it's made to spoof 50s sci-fi movies, but it takes place in the 90s. So stuff is very outdated, but then stuff is very, very outdated because it's even old in the context of the film itself.
Yeah.
So that was tough to kind of wrap my head around. Also, the effects don't hold up at all.
No, they're pretty rough, but I mean, like, if you put yourself in the lens of, hey, this
Right.
came out in an era where special effects didn't exist, and on top of that, it was meant to kind of spoof movies where the effects were pretty garbage.
That's true.
I mean, it really is more of a meta experience than you typically get with something from Burton.
At the same time, I would have loved for him to just go practical with all of it. I'm sure it would have been a little bit tougher.
Yeah.
But if anyone could do it, he could do it. He knows how to work small scale and make it work for him. And if you're going to spoof the 50s, why not do it the way they did it? You know what I mean?
Yeah. I do think that it is a very interesting... Do you know if this was like a passion project? Did you do any research into the movie? I don't know too much about it. Like if it was a passion project for him because it's
Seemed
based on a
like
trading card, right?
Yeah, so it's based on trading cards, and he presented the trading cards to the studio and was like, I'm going to make a movie based off this.
Yeah.
And they're like, all right.
That's
So
cool.
I'm assuming that he grew up with those cards at least at some point.
I mean, that definitely seems like something Tim Burton would have like grown up with.
On top of that, it's just it's in like the golden era of Tim Burton, so it's like he's just been handing studios W after W after W for years.
Yeah, and this was after Batman Returns, which was huge.
Yeah.
Well, and then he handed him the biggest W, which is Wonka, right?
You can get out. That opinion does not fly around here.
Well,
That movie's actually not that bad.
it's not. I actually enjoy both versions. But what I was going to say was it is considered like essential Tim Burton because it's part of I have like a Blu-ray box set that's a really cool Tim Burton box set. It was like the first thing I got when I got my Blu-ray player.
Yeah.
And it has Mars Attacks and Pee-wee's Big Adventure. Both are probably the only like only the Tim Burton movies besides maybe Dumbo that I have not seen. So
You can go ahead and leave Dumbo off of your list if you'd like
I
to.
was planning on it. Didn't have an interest.
I've fallen on that sword. It's not the worst, but it's most certainly not the best.
So, I mean, I did like the juxtaposition of the 90s and the 50s. It kind of plays around with your perceptions of the film. Like I said, there's some suburbia aspects and these kind of pastel colors throughout that remind me of the houses in Scissorhands. So, I mean, I like that part. The acting was pretty cheesy, but again, it's a throwback to the 50s. So
It's
it was
incredibly
supposed to
campy
be.
on purpose.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I like camp. So all that stuff really worked well with the design and the feel of the movie.
How did you feel about like the humorous aspects of it?
So I think that's kind of where it lost me. I didn't really find myself laughing or even kind of chuckling at all. What the humor reminded me of is what if Burton had made a bigger, more expansive sequel to Beetlejuice in the 90s. And that's kind of how this movie felt to me. It felt like kind of spoof, and it had some intense moments, just like BJ does. I don't want to keep saying the name. But in Beetlejuice, the scares were kept tight. I did it again. Yeah. Anyway.
Hey, bitch.
So it reminded me of like if they were to make a bigger sequelitis affected BJ in the 90s, where it's not as tight to the vest and you don't really have anyone to follow. So it's just kind of watching a story or a situation unfold without really having a focus. There's no real main characters. There's no character development. It just is what it is. It's all face value and there to kind of entertain you.
The most I know about it is just that the actual aliens are very iconic, and it always made me wonder how much that is because of the trading cards or because of the movie. As a kid, not knowing that they were based on trading cards, I thought everybody just really loved Mars Attacks. But then when you ask people, it's like I don't think that anybody has not a lot of people have like a passion for Mars Attacks, I think.
It's not one of the ones that people tend to even say, "Oh, I've seen Tim Burton movies" or whatever, and they name Mars Attacks or I've seen this one, I've seen Mars Attacks. It's not one that's up there with his most famous, I should say.
Yeah, so I saw this in the 90s.
Yeah.
And as a 90s kid, I found that shit fucking hysterical at the time. I want to say the last time I watched it, I was in high school, and it definitely didn't hold up as well even at that point. So I couldn't
that was
imagine
at least 10 years ago.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine how it is now, looking at it from the lens of 2020. Like I said, the art style itself is super cool, and like I said, it does have those Tim Burton flourishes.
It does, and there were parts where it very much felt like his, where they kept the practical stuff. But there's a giant robot, which I guess ties into your movie.
Oh, yeah.
So aside from the visual style, was there anything else you thoroughly enjoyed as far as this film is concerned?
I actually really liked Jack Nicholson as president.
Uh-huh.
I felt like if he was in a serious role as president back then, I would have believed it. I don't know if he ever did anything because I don't really follow his career.
Yeah.
But I liked seeing him in that role.
We kind of have your
It's bloated.
yeah.
Where Beetlejuice is tight, think of the opposite of that, where it's
Beetlejuice is
everything-
tight. Yeah.
Tight. We've all been watching a lot of a very particular YouTuber.
Yeah.
A lot of pitch meetings. But yeah, I feel like I agree with you. Like I said, it's been a long time since I've seen it, but I mean it's not my favorite movie for sure. I wouldn't even go as far as saying that it's necessarily like a good movie, but I don't think that it intends to be either. Like I said, as someone who enjoys camp, like I find that enjoyable. Mm-hmm. I know what I would personally score it, but what do you think you would score it out of 5 big-brained aliens?
Well, so if this movie was on TV and I was scrolling through and I didn't have anything I wanted to watch in particular, then sure, I might watch it. But I don't think I would sit down and intentionally watch this movie again. I'm not mad I experienced it. It kind of reminds me of something that Tim Burton would make now. Some of the editing is choppy and it's very convoluted. And it kind of reminded me of Miss Peregrine's, where it's like, who fuck edited this? You know what I mean? So if I had to rate it, I would say probably a 3, and that's high.
Yeah.
That's generous. That's a generous 3.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm always curious about with these, like, because we're doing these as sort of the concept being that these are essential movies, like movies that you should have seen if you are a horror sci-fi fan. And I guess I always want to know, do you feel like that's the case with this movie? Like, do you feel like this is something that people need to watch? Or do you think it would be fine if you just lived your entire...
I think if you grew up with those sci-fi movies from the 50s, like Them and that kind of thing, then this movie was probably great. It was probably cool to see an updated, sillier, bigger, more special effects driven movie like this. I would say for me, who doesn't have a lot of familiarity with those movies, it didn't really hit.
If this movie got people to then go and watch like those older like 50s sci-fi movies and stuff, then that's cool. I mean, that's what would make it essential. But I'm always curious, like, what about some of these movies makes them, because I know for like my movie, I know exactly why. There are a million reasons why that that movie is essential. So I was just curious based on your opinion.
I mean, I don't think so.
Well, that answers my question about whether I should rush to watch it, because I'll put it off for a little bit longer.
I mean, if you're a Tim Burton completionist, sure, it's not his worst thing.
Yeah,
but it's definitely not top notch.
We wish it was his worst thing.
All right, so now we'll go ahead and turn the microphone on to me, because I watched The Iron Giant for the first time.
Yeah, Superman.
So I mean, just to kind of give a slight synopsis of it, it was a animated film from the late 90s, and it featured a large robot who falls to Earth, and it's basically his antics of trying to figure out what he was made for and his relationship with this young boy.
Hogarth?
Yeah, Hogarth.
Hogarth, yeah.
Got it. I was like, I think I remember his weird-ass name.
Hughes.
Ties into kind of what we've been talking about the last couple episodes with free will.
And determinism, yeah. Yeah, it's been like a constant in basically since we watched Devs. That's basically what our discussions have been all around. I thought that it was super endearing. I loved the animation style. It was absolutely beautifully voice acted.
Vin Diesel, bro.
Yeah. And
how many times were you like, just say I am Groot?
I mean, I definitely felt a little ties to that as well, just because it is a very similar type of voice. I mean, he doesn't really do much to his voice to make either of them work.
At least in this one, if you listen close enough, you can tell it's Vin Diesel.
Yeah.
With Groot, it could have been fucking...
They put it through so many filters and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. I thought that, like I said, the story was super well paced. I thought that there were a couple of character things that maybe were a little off. Just like, I mean, why does what's his face care? Like, why is he so like adamantly like, oh, I have to have my one thing? Like, I have to be the reason why this robot exists and also why it's dead.
Oh, you're talking about the special agent?
Yeah, I'm like, it doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, I think that maybe his motivation was just he's the man, and anything outside of what the U.S. creates isn't right.
Well, I do think that it's supposed to be very classic, like E.T. type, the government,
Right.
Which is what I was going to say. This movie would be probably an awesome double feature with either like an E.T. or a Super 8.
Oh, totally.
Yeah, because I feel like it has very much the same vibe of like that small town alien, and the government comes in and tries. Yeah,
It's almost like an expanded animated episode of The Twilight Zone, really, with like the Red Scare and everything going on with Sputnik and how they don't want satellites.
I mean, my real question though, John, is did you cry like a little bitch at the end?
I actually did not, but it was very emotionally striking. I want to say that as we got to like the really sad part, the door knocked and the dog barked, and that took me out of it.
That really sucks.
Yeah, so I didn't get that emotional release, but it was very impactful. Like I said, I felt like I kind of knew what was coming because it's a movie meant for kids.
Yeah.
And I'm most certainly not that in at least some aspects of my life. I felt where they were going. And like I said, if I hadn't had that interruption, I probably would have cried. It's a beautifully made film. Like I said, it's super well animated. And like I said, it comes across so well even today.
So did the giant stick out to you as being computer animated? Because that's the only part of the movie that's not hand-drawn.
I would say no. No, it blends in super well. Like the animation style, it doesn't have like a jarring switch between the two.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's some scenes when the camera pans, and it's very weird. You could it's like the opening of Futurama, how it moves really weird.
Yeah.
And those scenes, I'm always like, oh wait, how the fuck do they do that? But I'm guessing it's because it's partly computer animated.
Well, and it seems like when animated shows do CG and animation right, it's when the CG is emulating some type of animation, which it seems like is the case here, and is the case in most things that I see that work that use like CG backgrounds or CG things mixed in with traditional animation, is copying like a cell shading style or an animated style.
Yeah, one thing I read that they did to try and help the blend, kind of what you're saying, is they made the lines on the giant kind of shaky to help blur.
I love stuff like that, like little details like
Yeah.
that you wouldn't even pick up on, but your brain does.
Well, and it was directed by Brad Bird, who went on to do a lot of things with Pixar and.
Was this movie Disney or Pixar, or was it an outside studio?
No. So the first thing that I thought of as far as a way to watch it was to go on to Disney Plus, and it's not there. So it's definitely not affiliated with Disney in any way.
I didn't think so. I was wondering if you knew off the top of the dome which studio actually made that movie, because I remember it being a big deal that it wasn't like a Disney animated. Because for the longest time, like since I was a child, they've always had kind of a monopoly. Them and then Pixar also being Disney, basically,
Right.
have just had a monopoly on animated stuff.
It's either them or DreamWorks at this point, right?
Yeah,
Or
and-
Leica.
basically.
It looks like it was Warner Brothers was the studio behind it. But
Speaking of Scoob.
To kind of jump into what some of the questions I'm sure are coming my way would be, I 100% would recommend it to anyone. Like it is a seminal piece of work that needs to be watched. I'm sad that I waited this long to watch it, but I'm happy that I have now watched it.
Well, and isn't that the point of the segment? You know?
Hey. Let me ask you this before we jump over to Anthony's. So the movie came out and it flopped pretty hard. I mean, now it has a huge cult following. Why do you think that is? Do you think that it was solely because, or maybe because it wasn't Disney, or do you think it was solely because it came out the same weekend as The Sixth Sense?
Yeah, I mean, it has to do with the time frame it was released in. I'm sure it was in a time of place where things don't get the same type of cycle that they get now. Like if you're on any application that's not Netflix, you're gonna get an ad for some kind of movie,
Right.
And that wasn't how media worked then. If you didn't watch TV very often, then you didn't see ads for stuff like that. And on top of that, if the kids aren't seeing the ads, then the adults are going to see the ads for 6 cents and go see that instead. So I think that there's a very good chance that it's just the time that it was released in. If it were something that had released a couple years later, it would have gotten the same credibility as something from Disney did in that time frame.
Well, and I don't know for sure because I don't remember. I was too young, but I wouldn't be surprised if this movie was maybe a little bit difficult to market, because really kind of with some of the stuff they try to do in the movie in terms of like the Red Scare stuff and like some of the, I mean, I do think that the movie is not, like it does have stuff for adults. I do think it tries to be a little bit more of a mature animated film. I guess you could just market it as Robot and Pal type thing. I don't know, but I would feel like it's a movie that might have been hard to market, and people maybe didn't know exactly what they were getting into. And also at that time, like Vin Diesel's not a big name. Like nobody really involved with that as a huge name or anything like that. So if you don't have a big studio behind it, I mean, they had Warner Brothers, but if you don't have like Disney or Pixar and you don't have a huge star, it's probably not something that people are going to be interested in going to see.
Yeah, I mean, it is kind of tough because at that time, there were still other animation studios that had like market share. I mean, you had DreamWorks was just starting to become a thing at that point in time, and then you also had Don Bluth, which was massive.
Yeah, Brave Little Toaster.
Yeah, all of those films.
That's why I asked earlier, is because I couldn't remember it, but I thought this might have been a Don Bluth thing, because that was like the other big kind of more subversive animated studio.
Yeah,
at the time.
Yeah, they did things like I want to say, did they do Anastasia?
I think so.
But I know that they did like Fern Gully,
Thumbelina type.
Yeah.
I love Fern Gully.
Yeah.
So if you had to rate this bad boy out of 5 broken BB guns, what are you going to give it?
Aside from my little gripes about that character, but I mean, it's for a children's movie. It's a 5. I mean, it still holds up today. I mean, it looks like if you were to release it right now, the animation style could hold up with what's current. It's beautifully beautifully animated, well acted. The story is super engaging, and it also tugs at your heartstrings a little bit, and it has some of those really cutesy like animation style moments. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I don't think that I know anyone who wouldn't.
Cool.
All right, Anthony, so let's dive into yours. I'm very excited to talk about this.
Yeah, I bet you are. Yeah, so I was excited to do a redemption.
Get your first time.
Because I had listed these.
We broke your cherry.
Yeah.
That's a quote from Goodfellas. Come on.
Every damn time, John. I listed these forever ago, and so I was very excited to get around to watching one of them.
Mm-hmm.
And my movie was the original, is it 1968, I believe, Planet of the Apes. I don't have a very good reason for why I never saw this movie. I completely 100% understand why it's a classic, and I've kind of always understood why it's a classic, and have just avoided watching it. I've seen all of the new remake versions, the CG versions, and loved every single one of them.
The Caesar trilogy?
Yeah.
Cesar?
The only thing I can think is that when I was a kid, I do have memories of stumbling upon the TV show, the live-action TV show, and being weirded out because I could not wrap my brain around the makeup effects. I could not, like, to me, and this is, I mean, obviously, like, a testament to how good the makeup effects in these movies are. I thought they were actual apes that they had somehow, like, trained to move their mouths, and then they had dubbed them. It wasn't until I was an adult that I realized, and by that time, the concept didn't really, I was like, I knew the whole plot. I knew the twist at the end.
Right.
So when that happens, I'm like, really? But that's unfair because, honestly, this movie was great. I mean, I could go on about it for a very long time, but I super enjoyed it. It's just a very well-made movie. Outside of all of the really impressive special makeup effects and set design, and obviously the really good twist ending and all that, the way that they build to that twist is worth the watch. Like, the way that they develop the world, it almost allowed me to separate myself a little bit and kind of experience the story with the characters, because basically, for anybody who doesn't know, Charlton Heston, his character, along with some other astronauts, are on like a light speed deep space voyage. They end up crash landing on this other planet, the planet of the apes. They discover that on this planet, humans exist, but they are mute and basically underdeveloped. Like, humans have, and they're under
basically apes and people switch places.
Switch places, yeah, that's the easiest way to say it. So apes are riding horses, shooting guns. They rule the world. That basic premise, I knew at the end, there's a big twist. Turns out it's Earth the whole time. But the way that they lay those clues is really well done. I think that the writing in this movie is great, and that brings me back to, we obviously are really big Rod Serling fans.
Right.
And I did not know until I was doing research for this that he wrote the original script for this movie.
Yeah.
And his idea for the twist is the twist that they use at the end of the movie, which is different from the twist that's in the original novel that this is based off of, the French novel, which I've read the synopsis of
Serling,
that.
baby.
Yeah, so Serling wrote it, and then they ended up rewriting it a couple times before they finally filmed it, mainly for budgetary reasons. His original vision and what is in the book is a much more evolved ape society, and for budgetary reasons, and is probably where my only stuff that I felt was a little bit on the cheaper side with this movie was the ape city stuff. Because you could tell that, to me, it just looks like a set from the Flintstones movie. But I can understand, that might be very unfair because of when it was made, the budget. Right. I'm sure it was very impressive at the time. But also, we've seen so many of these ape movies come out since that there's been a lot more impressive stuff done. But there cannot be enough said for John Chambers and the makeup effects in this movie. I mean, even for a little bit of stiffness that improved over time, it's extremely convincing. The fact that they were able to get these very well-known actors to be able to be expressive in these, especially like around in the eyes and moving the nose and stuff. It's a trip. It's really cool to watch, and to see like Roddy McDowall, who I had just seen in Fright Night. Yeah. To see him, and he runs through a bunch of the ape movies. Apparently, I'm interested now to see the rest of them. I haven't seen any of the original ones.
That's actually something I wanted to ask you. So yeah, you're interested in watching? Like, you watch this and you're like, now I want more.
Well, now I'm like, yeah, I want more
because this movie was good, or just to complete that you've watched all the apes?
A little bit of both. I think that it would be, now that I have the ball rolling, it would be nice. And I understand that the other movies are not to this level of quality, but I mean, there are fans, and
there's still value, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I mostly am just interested enough now in seeing an expansion of the world. I want to see more of like the ape society and stuff. I think that stuff is very interesting. I love how they really did pretty much like unilaterally switch roles in terms of the way that the apes talk about people and how they are discovering things about them, like fossils and all this. And it's been such a long amount of time that they're finding bones of our ancestors and wondering, and they just think humans have to have always been dumb, and they don't understand that those things evolved into us, and then we destroyed ourselves, which I think really, for knowing what the ending of this movie was going to be, the lead up to it, and then the actual emotional impact of that ending is very strong. I think that Charlton Heston, I don't know very much about him, except that he was a big like NRA guy in later life and everything. But I was worried that he would be too wooden or too like old school like action star, but I really enjoyed him. I thought he was a good actor. I thought everybody in this was great. The ape actors were all fantastic and very convincing. I love the way that they got into, which obviously Andy Serkis would really push when he did the mocap, but the way they did decide to go with an ape walk and ape movements and things, they really seemed to have put as much work as they could into making this convincing. Because I thought Charlton Heston was so good throughout the movie, it made the impact of things I knew were going to happen stronger. Like the delivery, when he finally delivers the damn dirty apes line. Yeah. I always think of that as like a joke because I've heard it so many times as a joke.
It's a very serious moment.
Very serious and very emotional. And I didn't realize that he was going to be mute because of an injury for the first like half hour of the movie. So when he finally does that, I realized when they do that same thing with Caesar talking in the new one and it's a big reveal, I was like, oh, I can see where they're doing the parallel. Yeah. And so it was very impactful. So there's the damn dirty apes. I didn't know the whole, like, it's a madhouse. I say that all the time, like, as a joke. Did not realize it was from this movie.
I think one of my favorite lines is, I'd kiss you, but you're so damn ugly.
Yeah. So I really thought that I had been unfair to the movie in the end. And when I got to the end, the thing that actually made me very upset was that the copy that I was watching, for whatever reason, the audio cut out in the last 60 seconds of the movie, like in the big reveal. So I had to stop the movie and go to YouTube and find that clip of the ending scene and watch it with audio.
Damn yous!
Yeah. Damn you all to hell! Yeah. And the score, too, is Jerry Goldsmith, I think. Yeah, it's very avant-garde. I didn't know about it, but it's very strange and experimental. And I enjoyed it a lot. And some of the huge sweeping shots in the beginning, like of the ship in the water, it's very impressive filmmaking. It just made me excited to learn more about this world. Because before I was like, I don't give a shit about the apes. And I also, in my head, always thought like, oh, the apes are the bad guys. Charlton Heston and his crew are like the good guys. But the movie plays a lot more like there are good apes, there are nice apes, you know. Like,
which is like, it's very gray. I mean, for it being black and white, it's very gray.
Oh, yeah. So I thought that the way that they actually made you sympathize or like some of the ape characters, I was just like, wow, I've been really unfair to this movie. So, yeah, I definitely enjoyed it. I want to check out the others.
I wouldn't get too excited.
Yeah, no, I mean, for me, so what I did with this movie, and this is actually, I'm glad that you said that. So what I did with this movie, because I felt like it would help me appreciate it more, is there is a very, very good documentary called Making Apes that came out, I believe, this year or last year. That is all about the production of the first couple of movies. Mm-hmm. It goes a little bit into the newer movies, but it mostly focuses on the process of putting together the original movie and talks to all the makeup artists and everything. And that made it so that when I watched the movie, I was really paying attention to detail and really appreciating things on that level. And I feel like maybe watching the other movies, paying more attention to the production will get me past some of the...
I think watching the other movies and then watching maybe the Burton one and then watching the newer three, you'll see a lot more connections and where they pulled stuff from.
Well, I thought it was funny that, because I hadn't even realized when I had made this plan, I was going to watch the Burton one because it's been so trash and I've never seen it. And I thought, okay, well, since I really loved the original now, I feel like I can have a fair opinion going in and watching this and deciding whether I think it is trash. And so I thought it was funny that we had a conversation about Burton and movies he's made that were not well-loved or successful. I have not checked it out yet. I'm trying. Apparently, he has a really off-the-wall, kooky commentary for it, so I'm trying desperately to find that.
That was the movie that actually got me into Planet of the Apes.
Yeah, and I thought so. So I want to check it out. I watched the opening sequence, and already I could tell it was a vastly different tone.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So definitely want to check it out.
So if you had to rate it out of 5 mute humans.
5 damn dirty apes. I would definitely rate it a 5. Yeah, easily. Nice. I think it's...
Yeah, thinking about it for the time frame that it came out as compared to the other things that were in the sci-fi genre, I mean, it's pretty remarkable.
I can see why it spawned such a huge franchise. It's no surprise to me. It's a great concept. Again, I mean, we say this a lot, but it really, especially with the Rod Serling connection, feels like an extended Twilight Zone episode, right, especially with the twist ending and everything. So, yeah, I would definitely recommend it to anyone. Go back and watch this one if you enjoyed anything about the new ones. yeah, go check it out. I would rate it a 5. I think that it is, to answer the question I was saying earlier, it makes 100% sense to me why it's essential for sci-fi fans.
Yeah, so that's going to wrap it up for our main discussion this week. We've got a couple more of our sci-fi misses off of the old back. It's good to broaden our horizons a little bit.
We can always breathe after we do these episodes.
I finally saw it. I finally got it out of the way.
I feel less like a piece of shit.
Yeah, I feel like a better person.
That's going to wrap it up for that section. We're going to go ahead and move on to our watch list.
Patrick, what is it? Where are you going?
I've got to return some videotapes.
So I do have some watch list stuff for you guys this week. I finally finished the Apple Plus TV show, or Apple TV Plus show, Servant, the M. Night Shyamalan produced show.
Oh, nice.
He does direct a couple episodes, and those episodes that he directs are great. And you could tell that there's someone masterful behind the camera when he's doing those. I mean, the first one is brilliant with the way that he moves the camera in and out and everything. There was a pretty big difference, noticeably, between the other episodes, so I wasn't as drawn into it. The big star for me was Rupert Grint.
I've heard that he's good, yeah.
From Harry Potter fame.
Harry Potter.
I was not expecting to like it, but his accent's pretty good, and I was pretty into his part in this show. Overall, the mystery was pretty intriguing, and it pushed the story forward, but I wasn't super impressed or into it. It substitutes scares for a lot more character drama, but there's not a ton of development there. So, I mean, it's interesting, but I would probably recommend it if you're Shyamalan fans, but I wouldn't recommend it if you're looking for something more along the lines of something like American Horror Story in that kind of tone where you're getting these scares.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And then one more thing real quick. This is going to sound weird, but episode 109 of You Suck at Cooking is a horror recommendation. And I know that sounds weird, but if you watch it, you will understand what I mean.
Okay.
So check that out. It's on YouTube.
I have a feeling we'll be watching this once we stop rolling.
I'll probably throw a link up to it on one of the socials.
Yeah, episode 109, Better McMuffins.
Okay.
I do want to briefly mention there was a video that you had me watch yesterday. I don't remember what it's called, but it basically is around the concept of children's horror and why it was big for a short period and then why it left. And it kind of really dug into R.L. Stine and kind of how he treated his career for a while when he was doing Goosebumps, basically kind of as the starter set, or as he called it in a direct conversation with Stephen King, the training bra to get you to Stephen King. And apparently he quoted that to Stephen King, and then Stephen King was like, "Yep." We will link it in the episode description and everything.
Yeah, I'll find it and we can throw it up.
It was an excellent watch. It all got me a little misty eyed.
Well, this is something that we've talked about on the show a few times, and it's actually something that
it's going to come up soon.
Yeah, so without giving too much away about what's coming up the next couple of months before the end of the episode, this is something that we are going to explore further.
Yeah, all I'm going to say is #get hyped.
Yeah.
So,
but the thing that I wanted to really recommend as my watch for the watch list this week was I took a film that was something that was originally considered for my very first horror shameful misses list, but I had already brought it up on the show and didn't want to waste something on something I'd already talked about. That movie was Behind the Mask, the Leslie Vernon story.
Yes, I fucking love that movie.
Yeah. So it showed up on my Shudder feed, which I'm super loving what they're doing with Shudder now on Apple TV. It's got the little sections. It'll have like one of them is slasherist. And it'll pop up a recommendation, or you can go in and look at the specific categories. I fucking love.
I love Shudder's categories. It's great.
But dude, I'm absolutely floored with that film. I fucking loved every second of it. I loved how super kind of over the top and happy Leslie Vernon is.
Yeah.
And just
they make him charming, which is
Oh yeah, I was super sucked into that character, and I didn't know where they were going to go with the ending once they turn off the cameras and they move on to what the real story is.
I love a movie that does that. It just mixes the film styles. Yeah, it's cool.
And there's a specific real shock value moment that happens in one of the bedrooms in that house when they walk upstairs, they open the door, and something you didn't expect to happen is happening, and it caught me completely off guard. Yeah, caught me completely off guard, and like I said, it subverted all expectations that I had. I knew what the base premise was, but it was so much better than what I would have expected.
They tried to get a Kickstarter started to make a sequel,
I mean,
and did not get close.
Yeah.
if I would have known, I would have.
Yeah, I think they missed their mark. I don't know how, because everybody I know that's into the genre loves that movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. I could definitely see it over an extended period of time growing like a pretty big cult following.
Yeah.
I love that movie. I'm super glad that you watched it. Also ends with Psycho Killer.
Oh, yeah.
Qu'est-ce que c'est? Yeah. I watched that having no idea what it was about years ago, and it blew my gourd.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you're a fan of anything like Scream or Cabin in the Woods, it is a must watch.
Very much so.
100% a must watch.
So my recommendation for this week is a movie called Depraved, which I had seen the poster for several times. I believe it's either on Shudder or Hulu, one of the two. I had seen it. Pretty cool, striking poster. Had no idea what it was about. Just knew that it had maybe like an 87 on Rotten. I was like, I'll check that out whenever. Well, it popped up on a list, and I read the synopsis, and I did not realize that it's a Frankenstein movie. It's a Frankenstein retelling, a modern day version by this director who I guess I'll have to check out his other stuff. I hadn't heard of him before, but I guess he's like a horror indie, like up and coming icon.
Okay.
Larry Fessenden. But anyway, so this movie is, I believe it came out late last year, and it is just like it's a Frankenstein retelling, but the way that they do it is actually, to me, very interesting. They make the doctor character suffer from PTSD. He was overseas in the war, and he was a medic, and he sees a bunch of people die and starts maybe messing around with trying to make that not a thing. And the movie actually opens with a scene that kind of adds another layer of emotion to the creature character, because there's a lot more going on with him in terms of the repercussions of what it would be like to actually take body parts from different people and the brain of different people and put them into this creature. It basically follows very loosely the plot of the book from there. It does mix up some things, throws in some other characters, does make reference. The main doctor is called Henry. The monster is called Adam. But then they have a character called Shelley, spelled like Mary Shelley. And then they have a few other characters that are named after other people from that time or from the book.
Yeah.
So that's cool to look out for if you're a Frankenstein fan, which anybody who knows me well enough or has looked at my arm
It's on your skin.
Yeah, knows that I am a huge Frankenstein fan. So I would recommend checking it out. It's not perfect. The ending, it did lose me a little bit, and they do just straight up go like, this is like the movie Frankenstein, but your name is different. And at that point I was like, you don't have to say it. We get it. Like, but yeah, I would recommend it. It's probably the best thing I watched this week, and it was a good surprise because I did not know that there was a new Frankenstein movie, because they went the route of not calling it I Frankenstein or Victor Frankenstein.
Yeah.
Yeah, they went a different route. So yeah, definitely recommend it. But there is a lot more that I watched this week. I'm sure there are other things that you guys watched over the past week. So what I am going to be doing for the socials, if you guys want to hop onto the Instagram, is throwing up our more extended watch lists as posts. We'll collect those. We'll throw them up so you guys still get those recommendations, and you can still check those out. But we will keep it to a more concise, one film each, our favorites from the week.
But what I'm really, really excited about now that we are done with our watch lists for the week is to talk about what we're doing for the summer.
Yes, last year we did the Strange summer and build up to
Stranger Things
season 3.
Yeah.
Which is actually where, I was inspired for us to do this idea. Is I like that you guys did. I remember when I was not a part of this podcast, but just a casual fan, I remember being really excited that you guys had like a theme for the summer. I always thought that was a really cool idea. So I thought, let's also do that for this summer.
Yeah, so why don't you go ahead and tell them what it is?
Yeah, so we are going to be welcoming you all this summer to Camp Porcelain Peak.
Yeah.
Which we are very excited to be opening the gates to. There's a beautiful lake. Can't tell you whether anybody's drowned there before. We can go hiking up to Porcelain Peak, find out who we truly are inside. But when it comes to the show, we are going to be doing a whole summer camp theme for the next couple months, June and July. That's going to include a few different things. The main thing for the show is that we are going to be doing summer camp themed topics. So if one of you guys wants to maybe elaborate on some of the topics that we're going to be doing coming forward.
Yeah, so summer camp often involves children. So like we mentioned a little bit earlier, we're going to be talking about children horror and horror for children and what that means, how it went away and how it came back, and that whole idea. Some of the other things we'll talk about obviously is going to be Friday the 13th, because you can't talk about camp horror without talking about Friday the 13th. We also want to dive into some other horror movies that take place at camp that aren't Friday the 13th, since it kind of has the monopoly on those. Oh, and we're also going to be working on giving you some original camp stories.
Yeah,
that'll be fun.
I'm very excited.
Yeah,
to come
I
up with
already
some
have the
spooky
loose premise of
stories.
mine. I'm pretty excited, but I do think that, like I said, we'll definitely be talking about some more like prevalent stories, that are meant to be told around a campfire. Things from like
Scary stories to tell.
scary stories to tell in the dark, that sort of a thing, in order to kind of get ourselves in the mood and also to help shape what our stories will potentially be. I mean, we all feel like we're pretty confident writers, but you could always use a little inspiration, right?
Yes, and we also have another roulette coming up, similar to the Creep Show in the Twilight Zone. I won't give away the show just yet, but it is very much themed around a campfire.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you can probably very easily guess if you're a horror fan what that is. But yeah, and then in terms of the social media, I'm very excited because I'm going to be putting out some camp rules posts in the similar vein to the health tips that I've been putting out. Doing some of those, maybe redesigning the logo and some of the stuff on the social to fit a fun summer camp theme. Maybe give you guys some like merit badges you can earn and stuff like that. But I'm going to try my best to make this the most immersive summer camp experience you can have from home.
Without being at a summer camp. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, and if you have any suggestions for stories that you would like to hear read or movies that you would like us to watch and talk about, then feel free to hit us up on any of our socials or email us at porcelainpeak@gmail.com. We're available there too. But other than that, that's going to wrap it up for this week. Next week, to kick off our Camp Porcelain Peak, we are going to each pick our favorite Friday the 13th movie to talk about. We're not going to tell each other, so there might be some overlaps, there might not be, but we're just going to talk about Friday the 13th a little bit as a whole, and then our favorite picks. So join us. Nothing's off limits. We can watch anything with Jason. It could be our favorite from the original to Jason X if you want, to the remake.
If you're feeling crazy.
To whatever. Nothing's
Yeah.
off the table. So hopefully you're familiarized with those because we are going to dive into them. In the meantime, I've been Anthony.
I've been John.
And I've been, as always, internet darling, Anthony.
Debatable. All right, guys. See you next week. Thanks for listening.
Keep it creepy.
You can find Porcelain Peak on Apple Podcasts, Google Play Store, Spotify, TuneIn, and Stitcher. Wherever you listen, don't forget to rate, review, share, and subscribe so you never miss a spine-tingling episode. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and at porcelainpeak.com for additional content. Special thanks to Randy Greer for composing the Porcelain Peak intro music and to Anthony Silva for designing the Porcelain Peak logo. All episodes and additional content is hosted, written, produced, designed, and edited by the Porcelain Peak team, consisting of Anthony Perez, John Brasher, and Anthony Silva.
This has been here words for a Weirdos production.